Some of the best minds in the world bringing you some of the best knowledge on TRS Clips. We got to talk about something else that I discovered recently, which is in line with apocalyptic predictions for the near future. Have you heard? See, I'm so excited to talk about this. Have you heard of something called the Hopi apocalyptic prediction?
No, I
Hopi
haven't come
people,
across it.
Hopi.
I've heard about the people, but haven't heard about this prediction.
So it's one of the Native American tribes.
Right.
And when it comes to America, we all know how massive that landmass is. What we don't understand is before white people dominated America, there was the Native Americans, what in India we call, which apparently is a racial slur now, but we refer to as Red Indians. Now, if you actually study Native American culture, which is spread across USA, Canada, and some people would even argue that it's stretched into South America.
Yes,
which
definitely.
it's the same kind of ethnicity.
Yes.
You know, native ethnicity.
Yes.
So the Hopi culture, very interesting concept, not spoken about enough. Even on YouTube, I found like one good video which we'll link down below. It's just an audio file about how the Hopis predicted World War 1, 2 and 3.
Oh, very interesting.
And the third one is in line with the times that they describe right now.
So there you were.
Yeah, and even geopolitically speaking, thanks to the Chavda culture, thanks to what Abhijit Chavda spoke about on the show, and thanks to all the army folks and the navy folks and the air force people that we meet on the show.
Right.
I do believe, I mean, I hate saying this and I'm not taking part in fear mongering here, but I'm seeing some tough times ahead from a geopolitical scenario, which might point towards some sort of a war. Now, when you tie this into what the Hopi culture predicts, it's just scary, man. They talk about the formation of the UN, the League of Nations. They talk about how the Native Americans wanted to be a part of the League of Nations and the UN as a separate country because that time they weren't a part of the United States of America. They were counted as sort of an independent group of people. Yeah.
Right.
And both times they were rejected badly. They also spoke about 4 chief cultures of the world. India was not mentioned. That before you guys get hopeful.
Right.
They spoke about generally African culture. I think its headquarters was supposed to be in Kenya. They spoke about Native American culture. Headquarters was near this Hopi civilization, which I don't know where it was, in which part of USA.
Right.
They spoke about white culture, headquartered in Europe around Switzerland. And they spoke about Asian culture, headquartered in Tibet. I don't know where India would fall in this. Would it be a part of Asian or would it be a part of Native American? And I'll tell you why I say this. They said that all 4 cultures represented 4 different elements. So the white culture represented fire and they were responsible for taking the world forward.
Right.
You know, like movement, technology,
the engine of the
invention.
world.
The black culture was the chief of the elements. It represented water and they were responsible for reminding the world of both power and humility. And that's what that particular race is blessed with.
Right.
The Asians were responsible for the element of air and they were responsible also for spiritual growth.
Okay.
Like we talk about it in our culture, chi, pran.
Right.
You know, and I love the idea that possibly spirituality came out of India, but I have my doubts with it. It couldn't have just been our landmass.
Right.
Possibly Tibet, China, these places had to have played a role. They're around the same geography, similar teachings. We have to look at it from a macro scale. You can't be like, oh, everything was India.
Yes.
You know, so that's why I kind of agreed with this theory. And they spoke about their own culture, which is Native American, which I assume is spread over North America and South America. And they said that their culture was very in sync with nature's elements.
Right.
You see elements of that in ancient shamanic cultures from South America, where they know about plants, mushrooms, their version of Ayurveda, their version of this psychedelic spirituality, their understanding of animals, the Amazon rainforest in general.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense to me. And they said that for total world peace to last, the 4 cultures have to come together and work towards world peace. We have to remember we all came out of the same family.
Right.
We're all one. And I love that message, you know, more than rather than saying, oh, India's better than China or India's better than everyone else. You have to think of the fact that at the end of the day, there's a human being sitting in Slovenia, there's a human being sitting in Ethiopia, there's a human being sitting in Brazil. And we're all effectively the same.
I think, you know, that's the next step for humanity. And I think Kalki will sort of help in achieving us, in us achieving that. So we can also see that in India happening a bit, right? So I think irrespective of the race or the color involved, the boundaries of nations have to break. The nation state came out as a historical thing, where when the nations were growing. So when you have that feeling of patriotism, you work towards development of the society. And that is how our ancient cultures were. They were always inculcating these values that would help the society develop more than the individual. So whenever you see an individual hankering for more than what the society can provide, you see a villain coming out of it, whether it's Duryodhan, whether it is Ravan, whether it is any other asur from the scriptures. But whenever you see an individual striving to bring equanimity and progress, you see godliness coming in the form of an avatar. Whether it is Krishna, who, he enshrined inclusiveness. He was born as a prince, but he was left as a baby, to grow with cowherds. And, still he grew up to become a kingmaker. The kind of situations and circumstances he dealt with, there were so many attempts at his life, even when he was a baby. And he survived. And whether you believe in the stories or not, whether you believe they were exaggerations, there were definitely some historical basis to that, right? But he faced all those circumstances to emerge as a person who would bring India back to a place from where it can grow spiritually, right? Same for Lord Ram. He set ideals for the entire society to follow. He was the ideal son, he was the ideal brother, he was the ideal enemy. Even as an enemy, he did not allow the Vanar troops to ransack, the harem of Lanka, which is what Ravan used to do. He used to abduct women in thousands from the kingdoms that he was destroying and devastating. And in fact, he suggested, in both the cases where he killed Vali and he killed Ravan, he suggested that the next king marry the queen. So Sugriv actually married Tara, who was Vali's wife. And Ram ensured that Angad, who was Vali's son, would be made the heir to the kingdom. So that there would be no civil war in the kingdom. Similarly, in Lanka, Vibhishan actually married Mandodari. Not a lot of people know that.
Mandodari is Ravan's wife.
Ravan's wife. So Vibhishan actually married Mandodari. And, again, probably to avoid a civil war. So a lot of things can be looked at a perspective of, a godliness or evil, presence of evil or good, depends on what you're doing for personal greed versus what you're doing for the society.
And what about Parshuram? he just went and killed
No, definitely not. See, Parshuram had a personal grudge to begin with, which he settled. He settled the score by killing Kartavira Arjun, who was the antagonist in the story. He did not have to do it 21 times. The only reason he continued doing it because he saw the condition of other people was also the same as his. Where, everybody, in the world, a big chunk of population was suffering because of evil and corrupt rulers.
This is why I want to highlight our Hindi podcast. I mean, a lot of our listeners don't understand Hindi and this message is not for you. But for the ones that do, there's so many of our English listeners which don't even know about the existence of a Hindi podcast where we've actually broken down these kind of topics.
Yes,
and Hindi, this local dialect of ours can bring a different kind of emotion to storytelling and content.
Definitely. So we had a very good podcast on Parshuram.
Yeah.
So, just want to highlight, because we're talking about Kalki, that Parshuram was the previous Kalki. He was a Kalki in the previous era where he did exactly the same thing. He killed the evil and corrupt kings.
Yeah.
And he did it not for himself. It was nothing that benefited him in any way. In fact, it was a tedious task to roam around the world, finding evil kings and killing them, right? And he was ready to do it even till the times of Mahabharata and Ramayana. Imagine, that's a massive responsibility. I would be like, I'm done with 21 times and now I'm resting. But he was still ready to do that.
Thank you for watching this clip. If you want to learn more about this topic, we've curated a playlist just for you. And here's a link to the whole episode.